Hello everyone, and welcome to the RV Inspection and Care Podcast. Yes, in addition to all of my YouTube videos, I'm going to add a weekly podcast to the mix as well. We're going to talk about all kinds of subjects about RVing, RVs themselves, the RV lifestyle, RV camping, towing, all kinds of things. So there's going to be a lot of information here on this podcast. And so what I invite you to do is please subscribe to the podcast, and that way you won't miss anything as I go along. For those of you that are watching this on video right now, you can go down to the description below the video, and there'll be a link to my podcast where you can subscribe there. But I'm not only going to really just talk to you myself. Today, of course, it's just going to be me on the podcast. However, I'm also going to try to involve other RVers, ones that we really could learn from. There's a lot of RVers out there, and there's a lot of RVers that have opinions, but that's really not what we want to focus on. What we want to do is find RVers that we can learn from. They've got something to teach us, something to share that we can benefit from. And I'm going to work hard to try to involve folks that I find along the way that will be beneficial not only to me, but to you as well. And I'm sure we'll enjoy listening to them. But now let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about one of the biggest decisions for newer RVers that they can face. And that is, should I buy a motorhome or should I buy a towable RV? Now, this was a very big decision for me, and I really kind of struggled with this for a long time, and I imagine several of you have too. And even if you have either a motorhome or a towable, you've probably kind of gone over in your mind, hey, I wonder what it would be like to have, one of the other kind. So we'll talk about that today. And the first thing we want to get into is the fact that actually there's a lot that they have in common. You can focus on the differences, but there's a lot of commonalities as well. For instance, when you're talking about motorhomes or towables, they're going to require some hookup at some point if you use a tow vehicle with your motorhome. So you either have to hook it up, or if you're a towable, you've got to hook the tow vehicle to your RV. And the truth is that it's about the same amount of time either way you go. So that's really kind of a wash as far as I'm concerned. The next thing is that both of them are going to require a certain amount of setup, a certain amount of tear down at the campsite, and it's going to be similar. It's not going to be a lot different from motorhomes to towables. The next point is, as far as costs are concerned, insurance and fuel costs to me are kind of a wash. You might have a little bit difference between one part of the rig or the other part of the rig, but when you take them both as a whole, well, insurance and fuel costs are probably going to be pretty close to a wash. But now, there are differences. There are things that would make either kind of RV more attractive to certain RVers. And let's talk about that now. First of all, let's talk about the pros or the advantages of having a motorhome. And the number one, this was the thing that really kind of got me about motorhomes when I first was starting out RVing. And that is that all of your weight considerations are already done for you. That was big for me. What happens is RV manufacturers, they usually buy their chassis from someone, they build their RV on it, and at that point they establish the gross vehicle weight rating, the gross axle weight rating, the gross combined weight rating, and all of that. And so when you buy that motorhome, you've got it all worked out for you. You don't need to have to figure out, okay, well, I've got this tow vehicle, what kind of RV can I, put with that? Or I'm going to buy this RV, now what kind of tow vehicle can I use to pull that? None of those considerations. It's all taken care of for you. So that's a big pro when you're starting out. The next point is that bathrooms and kitchens are available while you're going down the road. And boy, is that nice. You know, I've got to tell you, when you're traveling down the road, you're on a long trip, and somebody needs to go to the bathroom, well, you need to have a motorhome then, because that's going to make it really easy to take care of that situation. So if that's an issue for you, well, then motorhomes are going to be a good buy. The other point is that when you have a motorhome and you're towing a vehicle behind it, you know, to run around town in, you can have a small vehicle. You can have a very fuel efficient, small kind of passenger vehicle. And so that means that when you're running around town, you're not burning all that fuel that a bigger tow vehicle would be burning up if you're towing an RV. So that's a kind of an advantage right there. Now, the fourth advantage I want to mention is that if you want to go really light, then in a motorhome, you can buy a small Class C, you could buy a small Class B, and you don't even need a tow vehicle. You can actually use the RV for traveling, you know, around town. And so you've got all of your usable RV and you know, over-the-road vehicle right there in one vehicle. You don't need anything else. And that's of course, that's only true of smaller motorhomes, but it is an advantage that they have. Now, the next point is there's generally more storage space in motorhomes as opposed to towables. Now, that's not always the truth, but especially when you get up in the bigger motorhomes and the diesel pushers especially, oh my goodness, you've got storage space, and that's really nice to have. And the next point is that you can more easily maneuver motorhomes, in my opinion, into campsites than you can towables. Now, that doesn't mean that towables aren't easy to do, but again, think about it. You only have one vehicle to get into the campsite. It's like pretty much backing in a car or a truck. It's just bigger, as opposed to having two vehicles, you know, that you've got to maneuver in to a campsite instead. So for some people, they find that backing in procedure to be really valuable to them. So we'll give that advantage to motorhomes. All right, now we've been talking about all the advantages for motorhomes, but there's tons of advantages for towables. And one of the things that people really like about towables is that, number one, they are generally less expensive for the cost of the entire rig. And you know, that's kind of interesting because a lot of people think that maybe some motorhomes are less expensive, but pretty much if you look at the length of almost any rig and you check into the cost of a motorhome, buying a motorhome for that length, or instead doing the tow vehicle with a towable, usually you're going to find that the towable rig altogether will be less expensive. So that's a big point. It's especially a big point for newer RVers that want to get started in RVing, and you know, they like to keep their costs down. Now, the next point is that in some cases with towables, you don't even need to buy another vehicle to tow it with if you get a small enough, you know, travel trailer, that kind of thing. In fact, many little small travel trailers can be pulled with SUVs, even minivans, things along that line. So you may very well have a vehicle that you already own that can tow a smaller travel trailer. And if you do, you're all set to go. You don't have to make that extra expense in that case. So that's an advantage. The next advantage is there's more places to repair the engine and the components of the tow vehicle than there is for motorhomes. My point is this: If it's a tow vehicle, it's probably going to be some kind of regular passenger truck or something along that line, or as we said earlier, SUV or van. All of those can be repaired almost anywhere. You can find mechanics to work on them very easily. Motorhomes, though, are not as easy, and especially when you get up into those diesel pushers, well, now things get tough, because the bigger the rig, the more difficult it is to find places that they can fit in to be repaired, and even mechanics that can work on them. So in general, there's more places to repair the engine and so on the components of a tow vehicle. Now, the next point is closely related, and that is that they're usually less to repair. Let me tell you, when you have a diesel pusher motorhome, almost anything you have done to it is going to be expensive. The parts are more expensive, the labor is more expensive, and so on. So when you have a towable and you're towing it with a tow vehicle, that passenger vehicle again has so many places that it can be worked on. The competition is out there, and you can usually repair them for a lot less money than motorhomes. Our next point, while you're going down the highway, there's better safety features in tow vehicles. You know, when there's a passenger vehicle, they're pretty much forced to have the very best safety features in them. And so all of your passengers and you and everybody in that vehicle has good safety features. Unfortunately, motorhomes are not often quite up to those standards. Some are better than others, but some are really not very safe, especially for your passengers if you have kids and so on. So it can be a consideration between the two. Finally, if you decide to change, make a change in the RV part of your rig, well, if you have a towable, all you got to do is just change out the RV. You don't have to change the tow vehicle most of the time. And if that's the case, all the maintenance you've been doing on that tow vehicle, all the effort, the money you've spent on it over the years, well, you still get the rewards from it. In a motorhome, when you make a change, you change everything. So all the work you've done on the engine and the your suspension or anything else on that chassis, well, it's going to go right along with it in the sale. So that is a little bit of an advantage for towables as well. Well, as you can see, there's some advantages either way. But let me make this point. It does not matter which one you choose as far as RVing is concerned. You may have certain preferences. What I recommend is, as we've gone over the list here, determine what are the things that are most important to you, what's most valuable in your opinion, your priorities. And that will lead you toward either a motorhome or a towable. But understand that you're not going to make such a big mistake that you can't recover from it. Both of those kinds of RVs will take you anywhere you want to go in your RV adventures and allow you to have great fun and enjoy your time there. So what I've covered today hopefully will be beneficial for you. It'll help you kind of make the decision between the two, but either way, you're going to be able to get out there, go RVing, and have fun RV camping. Well, that's it for now. Have safe and happy travels, my friends. Thanks for listening to my first podcast. Until next time.